Welcome to Cwic Show today. My name is Greg Mattson. I'm your host. Today is Friday, June 12th, 2026. We are covering several different topics again today. The church comes out with an implementation guide for the new schedule starting in September 2026. We have a voter fraud investigation that's now been launched, several voter fraud investigations that have been launched by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the state of California, including Los Angeles. Elon Musk has an IPO for SpaceX, which makes him the first ever trillionaire in the world. Interested on your thoughts with that. And the political gender gap widens and widens in the world, but is it staying pretty much the same within the church? We're going to take a look at Alex Bass and Mormon metrics, as well as a BYU study talking about retention and political affiliation between the genders within the church. This episode is brought to you by the Go and Do Travel Wavemakers podcaster cruise. This is on November 14th through 21st, 2026. This is a great time, great presentations, bring the online community together with these influencers. And who are the influencers? In this year's Wavemakers, we've got myself, Hayden and Jackson Paul, Andrea Woodmancy, Carden Ellis of Word Radio, Jonah Barnes, Hannah Stoddard, Aran Sakandi, Jacob Hansen, Kevin Prince, and more. We'll be going up the California coast, coming out of San Diego, hitting Ensenada, Mexico, Catalina Island in Southern California, and then going up to San Francisco. Come join us for a great time. Meet some people maybe that you've really wanted to meet and talk to. I think you're going to make great memories and have a very edifying and memorable experience. Go to cwicmedia.com up at the top. Go to trips and events, and then scroll down to Wavemakers. Be sure to put in the code CWIC, C-W-I-C, to get a discount on your tickets. Here we go. Okay, so before we start on these other stories, I just wanted to get this in. The church has come out with a new implementation guide for the schedule changes that are coming at the beginning of September 2026. If we take a look here at the Deseret News that is reporting this, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints released a guide Thursday to prepare members for their new Sunday meeting schedule, which begins worldwide this fall. Starting September 6th, members will attend 1 hour sacrament meeting as usual, but will then participate in 25-minute blocks of class. We've known this. The new schedule allows Sunday school classes, young women, adult women, and members of priesthood quorums to meet each week. How have you guys felt about that, by the way? I mean, as we've moved from the 3-hour block to the 2-hour block and having Sunday school every other week and having priesthood and relief society every other week, what are your thoughts on that? How did you adjust to that? Have you wanted to go back to the old style? I know some people that say, I wish we would just go back to the 3-hour block, just because you had both Sunday school and priesthood or relief society every week. And others are like, I don't ever want to go back to 3 hours, keep it at 2 hours, or maybe move it to 1 hour. But this is kind of a conflation of both, right? We're going to keep the 2 hours, but we're going to trim the time of the classes down to 25-minute blocks. Is this something that you're looking forward to? How do you think it's going to work? I would love to hear some of your comments on this, because I think this is going to be a very interesting topic to see play out from September on through at least the end of the year. Now, I do have a guide that the church provided, the changes to Sunday school, the Sunday class meeting schedule, implementation guide. So this is what they just came out with. And if we increase the size here so we can see this a little better, right? The general announcement to the membership was on March 30th. The way that this is going to work is they're going to, on the fifth Sunday, there's a fifth Sunday in August. On the fifth Sunday, they're going to go over the program and how the implementation works. And I think they're dividing everybody up for that and just kind of covering that face to face, so to speak. And then on the first Sunday in September, the new schedule begins. And in Sunday school, members discuss sections 1, 2, and 4 of the implementation guide. In Relief Society and Elders Quorum, members discuss the section 5 of this implementation guide. So this is what we do we're going to discuss again what we're doing here in. So it looks to me like in August, that is the second hour where we're all being brought together. I'm guessing that's what happens in August. And then the first week in September, we're breaking up here into the separate classes and talking about how this is going to work. The young men and young women start using the updated For Strength of Youth guide at that point, which is fantastic. If you've had a chance to look at that, love it. It's just the way that it is designed is really great about how they're teaching the gospel and laying down the very basics, fundamentals of the gospel and a relationship with God. Really appreciate the way they're doing that. So we know the block schedule. We know how that's going to work. There's several, how sacrament meeting is going to work. We'll see how bishops are handling that. That is going to be kind of interesting, making sure we keep to the hour or less. I think we're going to see a lot of shorter sacrament meetings to make sure that we are giving time to the next meetings. So pretty much the same thing. The implementation guide is just kind of putting into words what we pretty much already know. Discussion questions for wards and stakes. Things like how can ward and stake leaders support successful implementation of the new format and what actions might unintentionally undermine it. That is great to see. They're actually trying to get ahead of the game. I actually really, really appreciate them talking about that instead of just, hey, throw this out there. Let's talk about some potential problems and how it gets people involved in making it work instead of just, hey, thanks for the new change. Let's talk about it and see how we're going to make it work. All right, on to other news here. Lots of different headlines about this, but the U.S. Attorney's Office is now investigating has launched several different investigations in California voter rolls and about voter fraud. And here's what the office is saying. The U.S. Attorney predicts people will be charged. So they've got enough evidence that they seem to see something here that is going to cause problems. Is this simply an administration strong arm move on California? There is, you've got Newsom versus Trump. This is a rivalry that's been going on for a very long time. Is something actually going to come out of this? I don't know. Here's what The Hill has to say on reporting this. Bill Asaili, I'm going to guess is his name, the first assistant U.S. attorney for the Central District of California, on Monday said it is likely people will be charged over alleged voter fraud in California. I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it. I expect people will be charged, but we need a wide-scale audit of the California voter roll, which is what Harmeet and I have been trying to do for the last year. Republican lawmakers have cast doubt on the LA mayoral race as GOP candidate Spencer Pratt did not advance to a runoff despite being in second place when the polls closed on June 2nd. Yeah, so the polls closed. He was in second place by quite a bit. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of new mail-in ballots are sent in. Again, as I said yesterday, I don't know that the system is going to allow for people to be put into jail where you're going to be able to prove that it's wrong, because you got to have legal issues. And I think that's going to be a higher bar to get to when you don't need ID officially in California, when you can, the way that they have the mail-in ballots sent in, they can be sent in after the dates required for the campaigns and vote the vote day. There's no voter fraud in bringing in ballots late. You got to have to go much deeper to prove that there is fraud. Is there bribery? Even with the homeless, do you have to show a residence? I don't know that you have to show a residence. Even if those individuals are from different parts of the West, for example, from Seattle or from Oregon or Phoenix or Denver, Salt Lake, wherever it is, how do you know that they are California citizens, that they are residents of the state of California? So they're going to have to look things up, like how are you showing what this is? Do you have to show a utility bill? They're not going to have utility bills. Are you going to show a driver's license? Are you going to, what is going to be required there? I think that's going to be a tough bar to hit. Now, President Trump has said he has alleged that the Los Angeles mayoral race was a rigged election. And sometimes he's right about these things. Other times it's just being verbose and throwing out, this is kind of how he operates, right? And he says on Truth Social, watch California, everybody. So does he have some information already where there are going to be charges made and they're just trying to tie up loose ends on this? He says that our election process is as bad or worse than any third world country. The biggest difference is they, being the other countries, the third world countries, count their votes much faster. They don't wait 7 days to tell you who won, rigging the election during each and every one of them. Americans are ashamed of what is happening. So, and I will just say, I mean, the trust from America right now on all of this is really very low. How do you trust the system? How do you know there isn't fraud? And how do you know that it doesn't happen on both sides? What is the assurance to the people that the votes are being done the way they're supposed to be done? The Hill says that in California, the primary vote can take days or even weeks as voters are allowed to mail in ballots postmarked by Election Day. Now, apparently, the reports I had seen, there were many that were sent in and signed even on days after Election Day. Ballots must arrive at county election offices by June 9th, which can slow down the vote count. So there's the discrepancy, right? So if you're voting by mail-in, they've got to, that makes sense, right? So if I'm sending something in on Election Day, I'm making the day, then I get a few more days for that mail to arrive. The question is why were not all, obviously, but why was there such a landslide of votes that went to one candidate in those late mail-in ballots? Why are they all late? That's the question. Is this legitimate in the way that party organizers are telling people to hang on to their vote and don't send them in until the very last minute you can? What is the advantage of that? So that's just a question I would have. Why are there such a high volume of votes for a candidate that was in third place? Asaili announced his office had multiple fraud investigations underway, but did not offer any specifics. He alleged that California's election system was rife with serious structural vulnerabilities. Well, that's obvious. That part is absolutely true. You don't need an ID. That's a loss of integrity in the voting system, period. He's criticizing the state's policy of allowing mail-in voting and not requiring photo ID at the polls, two practices Trump often claims, without evidence, contributed to widespread voter fraud. Well, let's see if there's evidence. I'm suspicious of this, that there's going to be something that is able to be shown. Right? The Justice Department has sued California for access to its voter registration rolls under the Help America Vote Act and opened probes into alleged voter fraud across the state. So this may be what Asaili is saying they're having difficulty getting, right? I mean, it somehow is Newsom holding that off from them in this battle. In an interview with commenter Glenn Beck, Asaili said, California is a fraudster's paradise. We know this is true pretty much from the Van Nuys hospice fraud, right? There's some unbelievably high majority of hospices in the country are in Van Nuys with nothing more than a post office box or a door with a desk sitting in it. So we're obviously going to follow this and see where this goes. Very important. You cannot have democracy without knowing that your vote matters, that any vote matters. So we'll see where that investigation takes us. Elon Musk today had an IPO for SpaceX. The company went public with its IPO today. The company is set to trade on NASDAQ under SPCX, its call letters, and the reported IPO price is $135 a share. It will be raising $75 billion made public here. Let's take a look at some video of Elon Musk with this IPO.
Yeah, it is certainly hard to believe that a little company that started in a warehouse in El Segundo is now going public for with the largest IPO that ever.
Okay, so this is fascinating to me. I don't know enough about the specifics of SpaceX and how they are gathering all of their revenue or where all of their potential revenue is. I mean, SpaceX was set up by Elon to help get travel to Mars. Well, no one lives on Mars yet. People aren't buying tickets to go to Mars. What I have seen is that the assets of what they have built through the space program, especially the AI systems to help productivity for businesses and decision making, is something that already has an inherent value within the company. Here's how the AP reports this. It says Elon Musk's rocket company, SpaceX, will make its debut on Wall Street, already has this morning, and both institutional and retail investors are expected to gobble up the 555.6 million shares going up for a sale at $135 a piece. Musk, already the world's richest man, could become its first trillionaire. Well, that's basically happened. SpaceX is likely to become the biggest IPO ever, with proceeds of around $75 billion. SpaceX hopes to become the first company to send people to Mars. Hopes to. In fact, part of Musk's future compensation depends on SpaceX eventually establishing a colony of at least 1 million people on the red planet. This is crazy to me. Not that it's crazy that it's going to happen. It's just the hope, the value of hope that is brought to this company. What are the tangible assets? What is it currently producing in revenue right now? This is all built on future expectations. Well, most of it, not all of it. Okay. Here's the question. Why is SpaceX going public now? In a video conference on Musk's social media platform X, he told JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon that people have suggested for the last 10 years that he take SpaceX public. He's doing it now because the company plans to put 100,000 next generation Starlink satellites into orbit. Deploying AI data centers in AI data centers in space is a massive new growth base, and you need capital for that. That's something we should all be looking at. Look at the controversy of the AI data centers in, for example, in Phoenix, or in the Phoenix area, and in Box Elder County in Utah. And all the resources are going to be eaten up. Is this going to make a big difference when you put the data centers in space? Is that easier? Does it require fewer resources? If it requires resources, how do you get the resources there? It's something I'm very unfamiliar with, but still, I mean, is it charging Starlink to set up these data centers and the 100,000 next generation Starlink satellites that are going to be put into orbit? That's incredible. I mean, you are building this. He's already putting several satellites in orbit a day right now. So incredible foresight and technology. So he needs more capital to be able to do this. Going public provides access to the capital that SpaceX needs, but it also exposes it to more scrutiny from shareholders and more regulatory oversight, but he needs the money for it. Now, how is this going to be set up for Musk himself? Well, he will hold the majority of special class of shares, giving him control over decisions related to company strategy, finances, and personnel. On the latter, because of his ownership of most of these Class B shares, the only person who can fire Musk as CEO is Musk. Okay, so this is something that, one of the things that the critics are saying about this IPO is a couple of things. So number one, it is built a lot on the future and on hope in the future. And some people want to be a part of that, right? They just want to be a part of that. And owning shares gives you the chance to be able to do that, I suppose. Secondly, it's a matter of Musk himself. What if Musk has a heart attack and passes away and he's gone? Now, he's got partners that he's worked with. I think the company here was set up, I want to say sometime way back in 2002, maybe 2004, somewhere in there. I mean, it's been around a long time and obviously has come a long way. But so much of this is him and his brain and his vision of the technology that's being built, its purpose, where its revenue is going to come from, and honestly, the vision and passion for being able to get this done. So the warnings from some experts say that finding a replacement for Musk with the same skills and experience would be time-consuming, if not nearly impossible. A Wedbush securities analyst, Dan Ives, wrote Wednesday, at the end of the day, Musk is SpaceX and SpaceX is Musk. So you're buying Musk. That's what you're doing, right? You're buying Elon Musk. Now, here is something that they are also selling as part of this IPO and why someone would want to be a part of it. This prospectus filed last week by SpaceX's biggest potential market is the sale of business-oriented artificial intelligence products. This is the product of this type of industry. Look at the NASA. I don't remember. I saw a list of this once of everything, all of the technology, hardware and software that NASA produced simply by pushing the edges of technology for the rocket technology and other space technology that they were putting in place. And because of this, you ended up with, for example, consumer products. I want to say, I remember one, I think was the microwave. I'm not sure, but I think the microwave was part of that. And all of these consumer products and other technological gains that were made through the space program with NASA we use every day in our lives. And that might have been the greatest gain by NASA, apart from actually reaching the moon, I suppose. But as far as practical everyday use and advances in technology, that's what it produced. That's a good thing to Google. What did NASA and the space program produce in terms of consumer goods and things that we might use every day? But SpaceX predicts that this AI itself, just the AI, will be worth up to $22.7 trillion. That's just the AI. If it could somehow dominate rivals like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Microsoft in a highly competitive AI industry. The prospectus shows no clear path to profitability for the AI business, which merged with SpaceX earlier this year. So they're not showing numbers of where they could go. This is, something that it's, hey, but this might happen, is really what that is. It doesn't surprise me. It wouldn't shock me if that was the case. And they may have this advantage because of the actual implementation of accomplishing such incredible things with their AI, that it could edge up against other competitors like OpenAI and Anthropic. Now, some of you may be following the World Cup. I'm not into that as much. I think maybe that is going to overtake at some point American culture. It's just such a big global event that we don't really participate that much in. Younger generations are starting to do that a lot more. But it opened up in Mexico City yesterday. You've got Canada, the United States, and Mexico that are participating and hosting the World Cup. I remember how big this was. I was in Mexico City on my mission when Mexico City was hosting the World Cup. I was out on a freeway, a massive freeway, during the game. And Mexico won. It was a 2-0 win over Bulgaria in the round of 16. And everything stopped for hours and hours. All of the cars on the freeway stopped because they were all listening to it on the radio. There were massive celebrations, people passing around beer and bringing beer from the local stores up onto what became a parking lot. It was just incredible to experience this. It was unreal. Just the whole city stopped and celebrated forever. These things, the World Cup is huge. It's massive. But us missionaries were, of course, just observers. I mean, we'd go around and give high fives. That was kind of fun. Mexico went on to the quarterfinals against Germany. They drew it 0-0, and they lost 4-1 on penalties. So they were out after that. But quite the experience. Now, lastly, I want to go over the Alex Bass over at Mormon Metrics on Substack. Talks about, he's got a title on this data point called The Missing Mormon Political Gender Gap. This is very interesting to me. He's pulling this from one of the large surveys, very credible surveys on the Cooperative Election Study, the CES. And he notes the difference between the really strong disparity and going in opposite directions of men and women in the world, in the West, where you've got women that are moving harder and harder to the left, guys are going further to the right. And so you're getting this real divide that is a little concerning. Now, women have always leaned a little bit more left because it deals a lot more with the ideas of empathy and compassion, I think. And guys have always leaned a little bit more to the right because it deals a lot more with order and structure, etc. That seems pretty natural to me. And the differences haven't been vast in that area. You're usually still looking at about maybe a 3 to 5% change one way or the other. So from 50%, maybe you're at 46 or 47% of men are on the left. And on the right, maybe you've got about 46% of men that are on the left. Right. So it's not some massive divide. Overall, there can be up to like about a 10% divide. I think those numbers are right. You can check that. And that moves around a little bit, obviously, depending on the candidate and the political environment at the time of the elections. But this number is growing. This gap is growing larger and larger. But what Alex is doing here is he's saying, okay, well, as these numbers grow wider and wider, for the Latter-day Saints, they're really not, which I think is interesting. I would not guess that. Because of other reasons I'll go over in a minute on other studies that talk about those that are disaffected from the church and the reasons why I think they might be disaffected from the church. But going through his data here, he's pulling from the CES. This is how LDS ideology by age works. You've got 4 different groupings here, not based on gender at this point. This is just for Latter-day Saints. And you can see that from ages. From 18 to 29 is the bottom dark green line. It's got a little bit of a bump up as you go into 2011. And then coming into 2015, it's dropping down, and then it's dropping down again. It's interesting how he has put conservative to moderate here. I guess he's talking about our starting point as mostly being conservative. So this doesn't really give you the dialed in view of these individuals. I think what he's doing here is he's grouping this as, okay, we're mostly conservative church, and this is moving further left, which means they're moving down toward being moderate. Of course, that's not completely true. You've got people that are moving very far left in the church. So I get what he's doing here. But it's not a detailed analysis of where all of the members are choosing to put themselves on the political spectrum. But he's showing the overall trend. And as it moves down here, it means it's moving further to the left. And then you've got those that are ages 30 to 44 in the light green. and somewhat similar, but a little bit older here. They start off even more conservative than the younger group. They come down and meet up right at about the 2020 level where they're more, I don't know if this is based on self-identifying or if this is based on your vote. In other words, identifying as conservative or identifying as liberal or moderate, etc. Or if it's just who did you vote for in the campaign in 2020. And you had fewer and fewer people voting for Trump, for example, as Latter-day Saints in 2020. Now, then you get an even further drop for the youngest group of 18 to 29 coming into the last election, but an increase from those that are 30 to 44 pops back up. So those that are married, more likely married and more likely with kids have jumped back up in the 2024 period of time. And then you've got 45 to 64, and you can see as you get older, you're more and more conservative. This does have to do with the politics at that time, especially in the church, for each of those generations. But it also has to do just with your age. People become more conservative as they get older. Right? That's just the way human nature is. The younger generations, it's going to be tough to ever swap that out. I think younger generations are always a little bit more liberal than the older generations. So 45 to 64, that also bumps downward. So that's fascinating to me, right? You've got a jump in 2024 from those that are 30 to 44 upward as counting as conservative, but the older groups being 45 to 64 and 65 plus, they bounced way up in the 2020 election period, but came way back down in the 2024. Is that right? That seems odd to me. He's pulling this from the CES. I'm going to guess that he's got the right data and he's using that right, but that just seems strange. But what I really want to focus on is where we get into the gender gap on this. And here you've got it divided up by gender. So you've got first the light blue is male under 40. So the male under 40 at one point becomes the most liberal of all groups, all four of these groups going into the 2020 time period. And then you've got women who have come down also in the same trend, same way, but the men under 40 bounce back up to more conservative in the 2024 period, but the women are trending downward toward being liberal still in the 2024 period. So you had a larger gap in 2020, but then the gap shrinks between the two because the women continue to drop. When I say drop, I mean move to the left, and the men definitely have a tick back up to conservative. So those two things right there do reflect the rest of the world. It's just that for whatever reason, you've got younger men as being the most liberal group in 2020. I question that. I really do. I question that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that is odd. That is odd if that is true. With the other groups here, the other two groups where you've got male and female over 40. So the dark blue and the red here, or magenta, whatever color that is, those are also different. You've got a gathering together. Instead of at 2024, they're about equal at 2020. This is interesting dynamics. In 2020 election, you've got men and women about the exact same spot in both of them moving toward becoming more. Look at that. That's where the disparity is in the age. You've got men and women over 40 becoming more conservative in 2020, and men and women under 40 becoming more liberal. And then you have men who still become a little more conservative or about the same to 2024 over 40. But then look at the women. See, that is still following that's still following the same trends of the world. So even though we are closer, we're closer because we're following the trends, if that makes sense. It's just we have a different starting point than the rest of the world does, is the way it looks to me. Now here he's got the rest of the world. Look how this looks here. This is what is so concerning about politics in the West. Look at South Korea. You've got men here. This is moving the opposite direction. So going down is becoming more conservative and moving up is more liberal. And look at South Korea. Holy cow. And that is just from 2015-16 on. There's actually a moving together in 2016. Women become a little more conservative, men becoming more liberal, and men had a steady increase in being liberal up until 2016. And then look at that drop from about a plus 15 to a negative 20 plus. That's a 35% swing, if I'm reading that correctly. And by the way, this is political ideology of 18 to 29 year olds, it looks like, by sex. So this is the younger generation. This is Gen Z. In the U.S., it's the same thing. It just started earlier. You got the big change happening, it looks like about 2008, and then continuing on. And in Germany, same thing, starting at around 2008 to 2010. And quite a change there. I mean, look at outside of Korea, where the biggest change is the men. Look at the change for the women in the U.S., in Germany, and in the U.K. Just a drastic change. Look at the men here going in the UK from 2008 up to about from about 2012 to 2020. They're gaining just like the women are. The same direction. They're a little behind. They're behind them, but they're going in the same direction. And then you see at the end here, just a little tilt downward. But that explains some things in the UK, I think, because you've got the men moving in the same exact direction as the women up through about 2016. What do you think the implications of this are in the West? What is that? Does it matter? Does it mean? It seems to me like that matters quite a bit. I mean, when you're talking about dating, when you're talking about getting married, when you've got existing families and the political disparity, the divide is growing more and more between men and women. Is it because men are more conservative, and if there's more marriage, women become more conservative? Is it because women become more conservative when they're married and even more conservative when they have kids, and that isn't happening as much? Is it the ideologies that are underpinning these changes that change a man's and especially a woman's politics? I think this is fascinating. I hope that Alex follows up a little bit more with this. I'd like to have explanations on the Latter-day Saints. Why is this happening? Why do we have a smaller gap? It is following the same trend, but why do we still have a smaller gap? I would be really interested in that. We're not where the U.S. is, right? We're talking about U.S. Latter-day Saints, right? So we are not anywhere close where in disparity of where the U.S. divide is, with women skyrocketing toward becoming more liberal and men going in the opposite direction. That's it for today. We'll talk to you next week.